Mhm. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is Dark Tower YouTube, where we're doing a deep psychological dive into the magic, the mystery, and the metaphysics of Stephen King's magnum opus, The Dark Tower. We have another Man in Black episode, and this is going to be one of two parts, maybe even three, because it turns out I thought this was going to be one of the simplest episodes that we did. Haha. But it turns out it's already I think it's a 25-page notes document. And I was like, okay, we're going to have to break this down. What are we talking about that's taking up so much space? Who is the Man in Black in terms of the names that he goes by? Who is he and who isn't he? And what did Stephen King say about that? And what does Roland think about that? And what are other characters thinking about that? And how did that change over the course of the story? Because it did. So that's what we're talking about today. There are spoilers for the Gunslinger here, and probably for the rest of the series. We may be talking about something that happens later. I don't know. But just know that if you haven't read the series, The Dark Tower, turn this off. This is not for you. Come back once you've read it. My name is Michelle McEwen. I am your host, as you know. And then Ash is my Dark Tower friend. She's been working on this series with me. Hi.
Hi.
You ready to do another deep dive?
I am. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. This is super nerdy. We're going to get so nerdy. What we're going to do is look at the unrevised Gunslinger and the revised Gunslinger in this episode. And then we're going to come back and go through the rest of the books chronologically. Again, maybe 2 episodes, maybe 3. We'll see how much we have to say. But the Gunslinger, for those of you who don't know, there are 2 versions of this book. There's the one, well, let's start with Stephen King writing this as a serial in the magazine of fantasy and science fiction, I believe in the late 1970s. It was published 1 chapter at a time. And then he decided this is not only going to be a book, but part of the first book in a larger series. And so I believe The Gunslinger was published for real in 1982. And then he wrote the rest of the Dark Tower over the next 30 years. And when he got to book 7, he was in a different place with who the Man in Black is and who he isn't, etc. And he went back and revised the Gunslinger. So he published the Dark Tower number 7, the Dark Tower, in 2003, and revised the Gunslinger at that time. So I just take for granted, Ash, that like people know this, but I run into people all the time that have no idea, that they don't even know there's another version out there.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not super common knowledge, but people who are listening to this are like, we know. But have you ever looked at the 2 side by side and really analyzed it to see what are the changes that King made and why did he make them? And how does that point out to us who the Man in Black was and who he became by the end of the series? So that's what we're going to be doing today, is looking at those 2 books side by side, pulling out excerpts and reading them, and then just analyzing the crap out of them, because that's what we like to do. So that's what you're in for. If you're like the nerdiest Dark Tower person, stay tuned, because all that and more probably. Now, Ash, I said we're going to go chronologically, and we're going to start with the Gunslinger, the unrevised and the revised version. But that wasn't the very first time we heard of the Man in Black from Stephen King, was it?
No, it wasn't. It was in a poem written by King in 1969 called The Dark Man. And that sort of like is the introduction to this character. And then also we learn, I think during his arguments at the beginning of the Dark Tower books, that he was inspired by the quote-unquote hoary cripple in Child Roll into the Dark Tower Cane, which is the poem, like the epic poem that inspired this entire series.
That's right. I didn't know about the Dark Man poem until maybe in the last few years.
Yeah.
But I didn't know about it for a long time. So some of you might not know about that, even if you are a big Dark Tower nerd, that the poem, The Dark Man, it's hard to get I've looked, and if you feel like spending a couple $100 on eBay, you can get this poem.
Yeah.
It's, I think in 20, so it was around, I don't know where he published it originally, sorry. And then it was republished in, I think, 2013 in like a book form, and somebody illustrated it and it's spread out over a storybook kind of thing. I want that, y'all. So who's got that? I think they're going to give my Christmas present. You can find copies. They're a lot of money. And I think, I want to say like I managed to read it somehow, even though I didn't purchase it for $600, because come on, I think I did manage to read it, but it's talking about this character, his entity, and kind of the dark nature of him, the shadow nature of him, and how he is kind of like just one ultimate mega bad guy. This is the bad guy. The Dark Man is the bad guy. He's all bad guys in one big baddie. And the poem kind of captures the nature of what kind of darkness could that be. So that was his inspiration for this character. And then, of course, like Ash mentioned, the child roll into the Dark Tower came. And we'll bring that up. I forget if we do it in these notes or not, but we will talk about that at some point in these episodes. Okay. Let's get started with the Gunslinger. In both the unrevised and the revised version, we have the same opening sentence, which we all know and love. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. And we just always have to have a little moment of silence for the immensity of that sentence. It's so good. It's so good. Every time I read it, I get chills. But so that's our first introduction to the man in black. And Ash, what do we learn? Some of them are very obvious, but what do we learn here just from this sentence about who we're talking about?
We definitely are sort of thrown into assuming that the man in black is the antagonist and the gunslinger is the protagonist, and is, giving chase.
So he's the bad guy, we assume.
Yeah.
And we did a whole other episode about, is he really though? Because that gets a little complicated and interesting throughout the series. So go watch, I'll link that, but go watch that episode. But the man in black. So he's wearing black, duh. But that's important because we'll see that be a theme in these other versions of him that are showing up. And we are like, he's kind of the bad guy that the gunslinger wants something with. So that's where we start. And then we gradually are learning more about him through, I think, first through Brown. So remember in the Gunslinger, we do those cool flashbacks, kind of story within a story within a story. And we get to Brown, who has met the man in black and we're talking about he's a sorcerer. Mm-hmm. So this is our first hint that he's a magician of some kind, doing some kind of magic. And then we go back to the next flashback where Allie tells us the story of Nort. And then what do we learn about him there, Ash?
We learn that he is very adept with magic, specifically like black magic. He brings Nort back from the dead, but in a very disturbing way. And so we are seeing sort of the description of this very like unsettling kind of magic that he has. Yeah,
so he is a baddie, at least again, so it seems.
Yeah.
Overall. We also learn about perhaps a different sorcerer that is employed by Roland's father named Martin. And that is the man that seduces Roland's mother and starts getting the ball rolling on Roland becoming a gunslinger. So that's another sorcerer, or is it? But we're led to believe that that's a different person when we're hearing about Martin, the sorcerer, right?
Yes.
Okay, so then we have kind of the man in black and Martin that we're introduced to. And Roland goes to the Oracle. So he gets high, he gets stoned, and he goes to see the succubus, as one does, to get some information out of her. And here we get some information about Martin and the Man in Black. Remember, Roland has been worried about what's going to happen to Jake this whole time.
Yeah.
Feels like this is a trap. I'm going to have to sacrifice him. And he's asking the Oracle about, what about Jake? Like, is there any way I can save him? And she's like, yeah, just turn around, go back. And he's like, I can't, Martin, the treachery of Martin, I am sworn. But what does she say, Ash, about Martin?
So she says, Martin is no more. The Man in Black has eaten his soul. This you know.
What do you gather from that? Because that's an interesting thing to say.
Yeah, so the Oracle is very, I guess, implying that they are, two separate beings. So that's, evidence of that. Sorry, my cat is.
That's okay. Cute.
But yeah, so just like, and remind me, is this also what she says in the revised edition?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
He says the same thing.
yeah.
Yeah. But it's like when you know how things transpire and you go back and read this and you say the Man in Black, or Martin, is no more. Right. He's no more. The Man in Black has eaten his soul. And we're like, oh, he's dead. But then when we learn that Walter shapeshifted into Martin, at least at the end of the series, that's where we arrive at, that he's the same person.
Yes.
I think we can still look at that and say, King didn't cheat. The Man in Black has eaten his soul, that he could have become him, right?
Yeah, definitely. It is sort of open-ended in that they could have originally been two different people, and Walter just assumed that role once he was dead. Or it could be sort of alluding to his new persona as the Man in Black, taking over.
Yeah. So I because we were going through this with a fine-tooth comb, and we're like, here's evidence that they're two separate people. And I'm like, well, yes. Right. And the way that it's written, I don't think he needed to revise that. Yeah. I don't think it's, he missed revising that in the updated Gunslinger. I think it works both ways.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think that we'll see King doing that on purpose in a way to line up with the idea that this character is shifty and chaotic, and he sows chaos. And so we're going to see that kind of hit that theme again and again through the writing. Anything else on that? I know. This you know. This you know. What the hell? Like, what does that mean? What do you take from that?
Yeah, I mean, it makes it seem that Roland should have that knowledge, but it seems like he doesn't really, especially going more towards their palaver at the end of the Gunslinger. He doesn't seem like he knows that those were two separate people, or something of that sort. He doesn't, for whatever reason, I don't really know why she said that. Do you have any thoughts about why the Oracle would say that?
We don't know, but again, when we and you all listening to this, we just love to just super sit with it and go, what does this mean? This you know, she says to him. But at the end of the unrevised edition, he's surprised that it's not Martin.
Yeah.
And so that's where we go, I guess he didn't know it.
Right.
Or what did he know? Or he should have known, but he blocked it out, or what? Right. But so I don't know. But it could be a bigger loop thing. So we're talking to the Oracle. We're talking to a demon, a spirit, who may know that this has happened before and it's going to happen again. And she just might be like, yeah, it's the same person. Right. You already know what happened here. And even Roland's like, I don't know. And we don't know. But perhaps when we get to the loop, maybe it could make more sense.
Yeah. That makes sense.
His soul knows the whole story. His deeper self knows the whole thing.
Yeah.
Just forgot. So
Yes.
I'm going to go with that.
Makes sense.
All right. So let's move on to the next thing, the next person, which is not a person in this book, but a place.
Yes.
So throughout the rest of the series, starting with book 2, when King talks about Farson, he's talking about a person and saying that John Farson is the good man.
Yes.
But that's not where we start in the unrevised Gunslinger. So let's read. We're going to read from the unrevised, and then we're going to read from the revised, and then we're going to compare what changes he had to make it make sense. So why don't you read from the unrevised? And just to give you guys context, this is the part of the scene where Roland and Cuthbert overhearing Hacks the cook and one of the guards talking about the treason that they're going to commit. They're going to poison the meat and poison the kids in the name of the good man.
So in the unrevised edition, it says, "It was Hacks and the man from the guards. The boys sat where they were. If they moved now, they might be heard. The good man," the guard was saying. "In Farson?" "In 2 weeks," the guard replied. "Maybe 3. You have to come with us." So,
and then, later in the conversation, then Hacks asks,
"There are children in Farson?" the cook asked sadly. It was not really a question.
Okay, so what do we pull out of this? I mean, this is obvious. It's a place.
Yeah, Farson is a town that they are
For
planning
sure.
to
100%.
do this to. Yeah.
There's nothing more to really say about that. But and I think King said at some point when he wrote the drawing of the 3, he didn't have Robin Firth at the time. I always think about Robin Firth and I'm like, Ash, like that could have been us, whatever, 10 years ago. Like he needed somebody to just like go through all the books and figure out the timeline and who's doing what, when, not to, so that he can continue writing the series. And I'm like, I wish I had that job. But she did a wonderful job. But at this point, he didn't have that person. And so he messed up. And I think he admits, he's like, oh, like in the second book, I just called Farson the person. I forgot that it was a place. So he had to fix that because that's a big difference.
Yeah.
So in the revised edition, here's the same scene. It was Hacks and the man from the guards. The boys sat where they were. If they moved now, they might be heard. The good man, the guard was saying. Farson? In 2 weeks, the guard replied. Maybe 3. You have to come with us. And then later Hacks asked, there are children in Taunton? The cook asked. It was not really a question. So pretty obvious change there, just getting rid of the word in Farson to Farson and changing the name of the town to Taunton.
Yes.
Something so interesting that actually this has nothing to do with anything, but everything has something to do with everything, right? There is somebody, and you can go read this, Ash, somebody super smart and into these books commented on one of my videos. I forget which one. And they talked about how come Hacks is the one that is like, judged and executed. What about the other guard?
Yeah.
I was like, I never thought about that.
Yeah. I mean, it's possible that there was another hanging scheduled, and it's just like potentially because Roland and Cuthbert sort of had a soft spot for Hacks because he would like give them, treats and things as the cook, I believe. And so I think maybe because they had that more personal connection with him, that's maybe what stuck with them the most, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, you would think though, I mean, who knows, but I would think that when they do the execution, like they'd execute both men.
Yeah.
But it's very clearly just Hacks. So I'm like, And I mean, it's not a big deal. It doesn't change anything in the series, but it is somebody who's looking at this book with a fine-tooth comb and going, what about that guy? He was guilty too. Like, he actually seemed to be more of the instigator
Mm-hmm.
in this conversation. And I was like, dang, that's a good point. I don't know. So you'll have to go read that. It's a long comment. Somebody's with it out there listening to this show. Okay. So that's a pretty easy correction. We're not too confused at this point. We'll get there. We'll get to confusion here. All right. So let's, anything else about that, I guess, before we move on about Farson?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously we see that Farson is referred to as the good man here. So that's something to keep in mind.
Yeah. A good point. They're linked together.
Yeah.
Right. So Farson is the good man.
Yeah, in the revised, yeah.
Right, correct. Not in the unrevised. That's right. You guys keeping track? Because it gets a little weird. So, okay, so now we have this part, and I couldn't find the context for it. I looked, and I don't have a searchable version of this one. Do you remember the context of when he's talking about Susan and Oedipus?
I
if you
also don't know for sure.
I mean, it's part of the story that he's telling Jake about what happened with, he tells Jake, it's in chapter 2, which is when he tells Jake about Hacks and, what happened there.
It might actually be specifically him thinking back to, I think this is what it was. It was him thinking back to this like Oedipal relationship in regards to the affair that Martin and Gabrielle had. And that there was a love triangle, but he could be included as a fourth if you go with that Oedipal connection. I think that's what it was.
Got it. So we're going to read these two, which are very similar, but watch for the difference here. So go ahead and read this excerpt from the unrevised version.
Oh, we have them as the same thing. Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
So, King writes, some years later, Susan would tell him the story of Oedipus, and he would absorb it in quiet thoughtfulness, thinking of the odd and bloody triangle formed by his father, his mother, and by Martin, known in some quarters as the good man.
And then in the revised version, it's all the same until he gets to the bloody triangle formed by his father, his mother, and by Martin, known in some quarters as Farson, the good man. So that's King just really putting a pin in the idea that Farson is the good man.
Yes, and that Martin is too.
Yes.
At least in the revised, yeah.
Martin is Farson is the good man. Yeah, that's right. That was an important part of that I forgot to say. Right. So, but, and also I feel like when we really look at this, and I'm like, okay, so very clearly King is saying Martin, known in some quarters as Farson, the good man. And I'm like, you know what? That isn't actually a direct one-for-one. Right. Known as.
Yes.
So could there be some mistake on the part of the people? Known in some quarters.
Right.
What are the other one things?
Right. Because it could be, like a mistaken identity thing. It could be him, again, taking the form of another person that does actually exist, that he is shifted into. It could be maybe Farson fell and so he took his place and nobody found out. Like it could be many different things, but we do know for sure that at least some people believe that he is the same. Like all of these identities are the same.
Some people, some of the time, think that Martin is the good man, is John Farson. So clear as mud. But again, I think it's very crafty when you really look at the language there. What could the potential for this being a shapeshifter or somebody taking control, etc. And I don't know if I think I had this in a note somewhere, but just because I'm thinking of it, That reminds me of The Lord of the Rings. Have you read The Lord of the Rings?
I haven't read the full series.
Okay, I haven't either, and people are
I've
going to
read The
turn us off
Hobbit.
now. Okay, I had to read it in high school, but and I tried to read The Lord of the Rings once, and I was like, I don't really, it's not super interesting. Sorry.
Yeah,
I did watch the films though. And which is why I'm bringing up the point. And I think we should read the books.
for sure.
And yes, you froze. Can you hear and see me? Okay.
Yes. Am
Okay.
I still frozen?
Yeah. Weird. Oh,
Hmm.
now you're back. Okay. Hopefully that was just a blip, but I could hear you the whole time, which is the important thing. Um, so anyway, I think we should read the Lord of the Rings
Yeah,
and look at
we should.
how that is impacting.
Especially
I think you
since,
had a good idea.
yeah, especially since King talks about it being such a huge inspiration for this work.
And just I really liked the movies. People are getting madder and madder because people who love the Lord of the Rings tend to hate the movies and they can't believe that I haven't read it. But I liked the movies. I thought they were very entertaining. I've watched them
Yeah,
more than once.
same.
And I can see a lot of similarities, especially in the Gunslinger,
Yes.
to things that are going on the Lord of the Rings. So, but anyway, there's a part in the Lord of the Rings, at least in the movies, where there is a bad guy, a dark man, if you will, who kind of captures the mind of the ruler of the kingdom. And I don't remember their names, but this was a good king. He has this beautiful daughter, and like the hot guy comes to try and figure out what's going on. What was it? Aragon. And it turns out that like the guy who's ruling, who was doing a good job and everybody loved him, is now not doing a good job and now is like making bad decisions and causing problems. And it turns out that this dark man somehow has enchanted him, entranced him, and now he's like the puppet and the bad guy's running the show. And again, if that happened in the books, I think it probably did. That feels like something that could be happening that we're not told explicitly with Martin, Walter, the good man.
Yes.
Like they could all be separate people, but just like what Ash said, did Walter get the reins? Did he take over? Because the good man, and he's for democracy, and he's quoting JFK and all of
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
That sounds like a good guy.
Right.
So why is he poisoning the children?
Right. Like how does that happen? But I mean, I
Mm-hmm.
guess also if you think about it in terms of like, Roland is sort of an anti-hero, but in Tull, he's gunning down women and children along with the men, and so, sometimes people who think they're doing the right or the wrong thing for the right reason, like it's a means to an end, that could definitely be one explanation. But also the idea that this man in black is pulling strings, whether or not he is the actual person or not. Yeah.
For sure fits the idea of the character. Okay, let's keep moving. I see I told you this was going to run really long. Okay. Okay, so we're going to get to the Golgotha. And now a lot of information is revealed, and King had to do some pretty heavy editing here
Yes.
to make it make sense.
Yes.
But again, there's some of it that's just like tricky, tricksy, or crafty, or like, that was an interesting change.
Yes.
So let's talk about this one where the man in black this is all the man in black talking with Roland, all of this that we're going to read now. So
Yeah.
we're going to start with where he's talking about when he came to Gabrielle. So let's read the unrevised.
Yeah, so the unrevised, the man in black says, I made your father, and I broke him, the man in black said grimly. I came to your mother through Martin and took her. It was written, and it was.
Now, when King revised this, listen to this. I made your father, and I broke him. The man in black said grimly, I came to your mother as Martin. There's a truth you always suspected, is it not? And took her. She bent beneath me like a willow, although, this may comfort you, she never broke. In any case, it was written, and it was. Okay, so now we're going to get super hypercritical about this change from the word I came to your mother through Martin, changed to as Martin.
Yes.
What do you think?
Well, so, like, in the unrevised, through Martin sounds like he was advising Martin or somehow, manipulating him into doing this, into going to Gabrielle and getting this affair started for the purpose of the fall of Gilead and trying to goad Roland into his trial of manhood too early so that he would be exiled. So it definitely is sounding like they are two separate people and that the man in black is just behind the scenes.
Right. I think so as well. And when he says he came to his mother as Martin, there is a shapeshifter. There is somebody who is taking on the form of, which is what he ultimately morphed into. He also added, which kind of echoes the oracle, there's a truth you always suspected, is it not? What do we make of that?
Yeah, it's hard to know because, like, at this point, it seems like Roland is convinced that the man in black is Martin. And so this is sort of him saying that he shifted into Martin, but he was maybe a separate person, but that Roland should know that. And we're not entirely sure. Like you said, it could be another reference to the loop because we do know that the man in black for sure knows that this is a loop. We've talked about that in some of our other videos, but so it could be referring to like his soul knowing. What do you think?
There's a truth. I came to your mother as Martin that you always suspected. That's news to us, I would say. Like, we haven't seen Roland suspecting anything. And Roland seems pretty surprised at the reveal at the end of this. So it's got to be the bigger picture. It's got to be the bigger loop. Or maybe it happened in another loop. I don't know. But all y'all out there listening, what do you think about that? And so that's the second time that we're seeing it, though. And I always say, when you see something twice, there's something there.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell it is, though. unless again, it's like, you know what's up because you already learned this. You already did this a million times, or at least 19. And that could just be the way that Walter operates. Because he is aware, so he has to see time as a spiral in some sense and not as a straight line.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm going to go with again here, but love to hear anybody else's thoughts there. And then he added this part about, this was new content about his mother. She bent beneath me, and this may comfort you, but she never broke. And I think that's interesting, knowing that what came later with Roland's feelings about his mother and how much that messed him up and played into A Wizard in Glass. Ultimately, we get back to that in The Wind Through the Keyhole. And I think this might have been King thinking, like, I need to explore that relationship more. There's more there. What he put in the revised.
I do think as well that it is directly sort of contradicting his mother and his father, because he says in both versions, I made your father and I broke him, but his mother did not break,
Huh.
but did not break. So that could, I mean, if we're going back to the themes of like masculine and feminine archetypes, it could be something like that, because again, Gilead was a very strictly patriarchal society that focused primarily on, you know, the masculine. It could be about like the different strengths that his mother had as a matriarch instead, and maybe a hint at what Roland needs to bring into himself in order to beat the loop.
Yes. You just solved all of the problems in the whole book. And I didn't even see that. He echoes that I broke him, but she never broke. I didn't even see that until you just pointed it out, and it's right there. So very obviously, he's telling us something about that. And now I'm thinking about what we're going to read in a just next, where he says, I never could have sent that vision to Martin in the unrevised, but he says, I never could have sent that vision to your father. He would have come back drooling. So we have this echo there too of the man in black does not have high regard for Stephen
No.
Deschain. He doesn't think
No.
much of him. He's like, he's not much. He couldn't do any of these things, and I broke him.
Right.
But not Gabrielle. So interesting. But we're getting ahead of ourselves because that's about what we were going to get to next. And this is where he sent Roland the vision of the universe, this amazing thing that almost broke Roland's brain, but he kind of hung on before he lost consciousness and he was okay. And then what does Walter say to him in the unrevised edition?
Yeah, you did fairly well, the man in black said. I never could have sent that vision to Martin. He would have come back drooling.
And then same sentences in the revised, except he says, I never could have sent that vision to your father. So he changes that because by the revised edition, we're saying that this is the same person. So in that first excerpt, if Walter's sending something to Martin, then they're definitely two separate people.
Exactly, yeah.
But by the end of the series, they're not. And so he had to change that. But interesting choice that he...
Yeah, because there are so many different people that he could have chosen for that. So specifically choosing his father is interesting, especially, like you said, right after saying, I broke him, you know. So it definitely does show that he doesn't think that Stephen was up to the task, really, I guess, and that Roland is going beyond what his father was capable of.
Yeah. So it tells us something about the man in black, it tells us something about Stephen, and it tells us something about Roland right there, which is cool. And anything else about that part before we move on to the ageless stranger?
I don't think so. I think just, for unrevised, they're definitely two different people, and then for revised, they are the same, or at least Walter has taken over as Martin if they weren't originally the same people.
Yes, thanks for catching us up. And I meant to do that more often, but I didn't, but you just did. So I think everybody's kind of keeping up and just seeing again. These books, I mean, you could read either one and it still works, but you may feel a little confused, and depending on which one you read, especially if you read the unrevised edition, by the time you get to book 3 or 4, you might be going, wait, huh? Right. I thought that, and there's all kinds of Reddit just questions about this very thing. So hopefully this is helping people understand. They're pretty different in terms of who this person was and who he became.
Yes.
And okay, so we have another wizard that enters the chat. The ageless stranger is introduced, and this is not somebody we've heard about so far in either one of the stories. And let's figure out how he fits into the whole lore of the world of the Dark Tower. And this is a longer excerpt. So we're going to kind of take it chunk by chunk because there's pretty major revisions, or at least interesting changes in
Yeah.
each section. Okay, so let's start with the unrevised version. And again, Roland and Walter having their palaver, and Roland's trying to figure out, who is this guy? What is he doing?
Yeah.
What am I doing? What am I supposed to do? That's what this conversation is about.
Yeah. So Roland asks, "Who is your master?" "I have never seen him, but you must. In order to reach the tower, you must reach this one first, the ageless stranger." The man in black smiled spitelessly. "You must slay him, Gunslinger. Yet I think it is not what you wish to ask."
So Stephen King changes this and he says, "Who is your king?" Stephen King says, "Who is your king?" "I have never seen him, but you must. But before you meet him, but before you meet him, you must first meet the ageless stranger." And that is, the rest of it is kind of the same. But that change from master to king,
Yes.
what do we think about that?
Definitely foreshadowing the Crimson King, as the architect of all of this.
Yes, I also think it gets at Stephen King as the architect of all of it.
Yes. Yeah.
Stephen King as the Crimson King, perhaps, just using the word king there gets into that kind of play that we do later with King as a character as well.
Yes. Yeah.
As the writer of the book. And we'll do at some point in the next 30 years, we'll have to do an episode about the storytelling of it all, because this is ultimately a series about stories and storytellers.
Yes.
And that's what everyone's like, why did King put himself in the book? That's so stupid. And I'm like, no, it's not. If you look at the bigger theme of stories and storytellers, it actually is exactly what needed to happen.
Yeah. I mean, especially, King has talked about writing as an addiction or compulsion for him. And so this sort of like delves into like, why are some people called to write? Why are some people called to be these storytellers? Getting maybe into the metaphysical side of King as a person rather than just his series. But yeah, I think that is sort of a question that he was maybe trying to answer for himself through this work.
I think so too. And it's going to be really cool to talk about that. That's some of my favorite parts. People hate that, but I'm like, this is so fun. It's so fun.
It is.
And it must have been so fun. Like, I know it was fun for him to write as well.
Yeah.
All right. So that's that. But I also want to say before we move on that the man in black is saying, I don't think that's what you wanted to ask. Because we're going to get to the question that Roland wants to ask. And it's very different in the two different versions. So this is the first time that comes up where he's like, yeah, I'll tell you, but that's not what you want to know.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's move on to go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say, in the unrevised, his master is the ageless stranger, versus in the revised, he is below his king, like he is a step on the way. Like the ageless stranger is someone that Roland needs to defeat before he can get to the king.
Yes, right. Because I mean, he does say we could talk about. He does say you must slay him.
Yeah.
Gunslinger. And I decided, I think with good thinking, Michelle, to pull out, because I have a whole idea now about the ageless stranger. I think is Roland in some version of this, but it's too much. It's going to be a separate episode, guys, because it's too much. But the idea of you must slay the ageless stranger, and then saying like, who's your master? I think again the language could be tricky here, because he's saying, I've never seen him, but you must, in order to reach the tower, you must reach this one first. And we assume that he's talking about his master, but it doesn't have to mean that.
Right.
It probably does, but it doesn't have to.
Well,
But
and
go
you could
ahead.
also see it as like maybe not his master in terms of the person in charge of the Dark Tower who is giving his commands, but you could view Roland as the master of this loop because it is him. Like, he is the one that has to break it, and everybody's stuck until he breaks it. So, in that sense, he could be the master.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Yeah, we'll do a whole separate episode on that itself because I think that's a lot to think about and ponder.
Mm-hmm.
But he changes that you must reach this one first to you must first meet the ageless stranger. So that's different. He's kind of saying those are different people in the second one, and we're assuming in the unrevised that it's the same.
Yeah.
Although there's always I feel like he always leaves a little room for
Mm-hmm.
finagling. Okay. Okay. So moving on. So this is the next part of that conversation in the unrevised edition.
Yeah, so Roland is replying here. If you've never seen him, how do you know him? He came to me once in a dream. As a stripling, he came to me when I lived in a far land, 1,000 years ago, or 5 or 10. He came to me in days before the old ones had yet to cross the sea, in a land called England. A sheaf of centuries ago, he imbued me with my duty, although there were errands in between my youth and my apotheosis. You are that gunslinger, he tittered. You see, someone has taken you seriously.
Okay. So that's what he wrote originally. And
Mm-hmm.
now he's changing that. And he says, if you've never seen not him, but your king and master. So using that word king again, how do you know him? He comes to me in dreams. So there's plural there. As a stripling, he came to me when I lived, poor and unknown, in a far land. And then King deletes the part about how long, and he deletes the part about England, which is kind of disappointing because I thought that was cool.
Right?
But that's crossed out. Sheep of centuries ago, he imbued me with my duty and promised me my reward. Although there were many errands in my youth and the days of my manhood, and then the rest is the same. But that idea of repeating the word king, I think, is notable there, using that twice.
Yes. Yeah.
And so he's dreaming about him often. I think that's also notable about this character.
Yes.
And then too bad that we lost the idea of that we knew in the first book that the man in black was English. That was cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anything else on that? I mean, that's kind of straightforward, but
I think it's interesting that he uses the term apotheosis. He does it in both versions, but that is the act of like a mortal becoming a god.
yeah.
And so I do think that's interesting to keep in mind, is like he's obviously more than a man, and he's, because of that, is potentially unknowable entirely. But yeah, just something to keep in mind with his character. I don't think he's actually like a literal god, but he's clearly more than just a mortal.
And striving to be a god.
Yeah.
And he's saying like Roland is part of that.
Yes.
Like Roland's needed for that. You are that gunslinger. That's big.
Yeah. Especially because, like, obviously we won't get to it really in this video, but when we talk about who else the Man in Black is and the other books that he is a part of, he's conquering worlds, essentially, like, so for Roland to be above all of that is big.
I think so too. And this has nothing to do with anything either, but it was just kind of this funny synchronicity where I got, I think yesterday, I got a perfume sample and the name of it was Apotheos, based on the word apotheosis. And I was like, ooh, that's nice. Part of the gang. Part of the God gang. Okay, so let's keep moving. So we're on. Okay, so this is number 3. If you're keeping
Yes.
up with this conversation. Okay, so in the unrevised, so we're still asking about the stranger. This is Roland.
Yeah. So Roland says, "This stranger has no name. Oh, he is named. And what is his name?" "Marilyn," the man in black said softly, and somewhere in the easterly darkness where the mountains lay, a rock slide punctuated his words, and a puma screamed like a woman. The gunslinger shivered, and the man in black flinched. "Yet I do not think that is what you wish to ask, either. It is not your nature to think so far ahead."
And in the revised edition, he changes the sentence slightly, and this stranger, does he have a name? That feels like a grammatical flow
Yeah.
kind of thing. Big deal. But here's a big change. Oh, he is named. And what is his name? Legion, the man in black said softly. And then the rest is the same. So we've made a pretty big turn of events there from
Yeah.
Maryland. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think especially going back to like when through the keyhole and everything, because Marilyn is changed into not being an antagonist. King needed someone else in that place that would make more sense. And that, so I think that that's where that came from. And then Legion is definitely like there's different references that it could be to. Obviously, Legion is one of the demons that's most well known in the Bible. That's, you know, one of the only named demons, I think, in the actual like canonical Bible. So it could be a reference to that. It could also be a reference to the wizard in Storm of the Century, which King wrote. That wizard was, his name was ended up being Legion as well. So it could be this other wizard guy, or a demon.
Yeah. The idea of, in the Bible, the idea that the man is possessed and Jesus casts, he says, "What is your name?" And his name is Legion. And it's like many demons
Yeah,
in the
yeah, yeah.
one man.
Yes.
And so there's something there too about the multifaceted characters of the man in
Mm-hmm.
black and different names and faces that he takes as, and he's talking about the ageless stranger here, but it does feel like that's also a similar thing to Walter Flagg. I don't,
Yeah.
right? But they're not the same person, at least in the first one. In the unrevised, Marilyn is not Walter
Right.
because he's referring to him. So, and by the time we get to, I think, the Wastelands, Richard Fannin is saying, "Some have called me Marilyn or Merlin, but it doesn't matter because I was never those people." So King has
Yeah.
decided by that point that this is not who he is,
Yes.
that it's a separate person. But he just pulls that name out altogether in the revised edition, and I think throws in a term that, like you kind of said, could mean a lot of different things depending on the angle that we look at it. So that's cool, and kind of keeping with the theme of things. And just to say again, we're going to do a whole episode about the who is the ageless stranger really, and
Mm-hmm.
could it involve Roland in terms of, Legion, kind of one for many, and the shadow side of Roland. We did a whole episode about that too, which I think that has some good legs actually in terms of a
Mm-hmm.
harebrained theory. Okay, but let's keep moving. Unless there's something else there that we missed.
Um, I don't think so. I think we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, so the unrevised says, "The gunslinger knew the question. It had gnawed him all this night, and he thought for years before. It trembled on his lips, but he didn't ask it, not yet. This stranger, this Marilyn, is a minion of the tower, like yourself, much greater than I. It has been given to him to live backward in time. He darkles, he tints. He is in all times. Yet there is one greater than he. Who? The beast, the man in black whispered fearfully, the keeper of the tower, the originator of all glamour. What is it? What is this beast? Ask me no more, the man in black cried. His voice aspired to sternness and crumbled into beseechment. I know not. I do not wish to know. To speak of the beast is to speak of the ruination of one's own soul. Before it, Marilyn is as I am to him.
Okay. And then in the revised edition, he writes, the gunslinger knew the question. It had gnawed him all this night, and he thought for years before. He trembled on his lips, but he didn't ask it, not yet. This stranger is a minion of the tower, like yourself? Yar. He darkles, he tinks, he is in all times, yet there is one greater than he. Who? Ask me no more, the man in black cried. His voice aspired to sternness and crumbled into beseechment. I know not, I do not wish to know. To speak of the things in end world is to speak of the ruination of one's own soul. A lot of differences there.
Yeah, definitely.
We got rid of Marilyn in the second one, so that's pretty obvious. We got rid of Marilyn's living backward in time because I guess that's no longer relevant. And then we got rid of the beast as well, which I think is interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
And he added, instead of saying to speak of the beast is to speak of the ruination of one's own soul, he added the things in end world, which that's a pretty nice bow on book 6 and 7, I guess. 7.
Yeah. Yeah. He also got rid of the stranger being the keeper of the tower, or the beast being the keeper of the tower and the originator of all glamour. And instead of attributing that to the stranger, he just took that out entirely. But I do think it's interesting, specifically the originator of all glamour, because a glamour is, disguising yourself, which is what the Man in Black does. That's an interesting thing that he decided to remove.
He should have kept it. And I was just reading through Wizard and Glass or The Wasteland, something where Richard Fannin shows up, and that he uses that word beast. So it's funny because when you look at this, you're kind of saying, okay, in the first one, we're talking about the beast a lot. And even book 1, book 2, even in book 3, I think King is still on that thread. And then somewhere drops it.
Yeah.
But that's one I think he should have held on to.
Yeah, and it's also, going back to what we talked about in the shadow video of Roland referring to, or like worrying what would happen if he reached the tower as a beast. So that thread is definitely still there until he took it out in the revised.
I know. See, this is where if I had that job, I would have been like, listen, you need to keep this because it ties in so nicely with some of these other ideas. See? And then he would have kept it. I know he would have. Okay, but we're still in this conversation. We're at an hour, so let's keep rolling unless there's something else we missed there.
I think so.
Okay, so now we get to the question that the Man in Black's like, that's not what you wanted to ask. I don't think that's what you wanted to ask either. And Roland's like, no, it's gnawing at my soul. So what is this big question?
Yeah, so in the unrevised, Roland says, do I know you? Have I seen you somewhere before? Yes. Where? The gunslinger leaned forward urgently. This was a question of his destiny. The Man in Black clapped his hands to his mouth and giggled through them like a small child. I think you know. Where? He was on his feet. His hands had dropped to the worn butts of his guns. Not with those, Gunslinger. Those do not open doors. Those only close them forever. Where? The gunslinger reiterated. Must I give him a hint? The Man in Black asked the darkness. I believe I must. He looked at the gunslinger with eyes that burned.
All right. Now we have the revised edition, and the question that Roland asked is completely different. He doesn't say, do I know you? He says, will I succeed? Will I win through? If I answered that question, Gunslinger, you'd kill me. I ought to kill you. You need killing. His hands had dropped to the worn butts of his guns. Those do not open doors, Gunslinger. Those only close them forever. Where must I go? Start west. Go to the sea. Where the world ends is where you must begin. I mean, that's a very different thing
very
there.
different. Going from do I know you to will I succeed, just completely different motivations.
Yeah. And when we look at it critically, the question of his destiny of being like, have I seen you before, doesn't feel quite as weighty as am I going to get there? Am I going to get to the tower? So that feels like a better fit as to like what the big question is. Also, though, what I noticed when you were reading it, we got shoot, where is it? Oh, I think you know. Here's a 3-beat on that. You know, you should know, you suspected, you know this. So like, there it is again. I think you know. No, he doesn't. That's why he's here and asking you. He has no idea, but King is telling us something here. So there it is again.
Maybe referring to the loop again. Or we know that Roland is not imaginative as a person, and is good at like shutting down thoughts. So it could also be something of like he knows, but his mind won't let him know. Maybe like a sort of like protection of the ego kind of thing, but I don't know.
Yeah, or here's another explanation. The man in black, maybe, like we just kind of pointed out, he doesn't have a lot of respect for Stephen Deschain, maybe some more for Gabrielle, but a lot for Roland. And Roland being like my apotheosis, you are that gunslinger. Like you're a big part of me becoming a god and you becoming a god or breaking the loop. And how he's giving like he's giving Roland a lot of credit, maybe. Like he doesn't know that Roland doesn't know, but he's like, Roland is with it and he's smart and he's good at this. So probably he's figured it out. Maybe he suspected, he must suspect that I'm onto something. He must know who I am. So it could be that as well, maybe.
Yeah. I do also find it. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it doesn't really have much to do with the Man in Black, but this specific section being revised sort of changes Roland's characterization a little bit, whereas in the unrevised he is very quick to anger. At least in this section, but in the revised, he's more cool-headed. He is still threatening the Man in Black, but he's not like yelling at him while he's trying to do it.
Good catch. Yeah, Roland responds differently. And there are some people who say read the unrevised, read the series, and then go back and read the revised Gunslinger to get kind of the loop happening in real time, like the changes of Roland. And I think that could be a good example of Roland in the 19th versus the 20th or something.
For sure. And then he also, after the will I succeed, he asks where he needs to go, and the Man in Black is giving him like direction, which he doesn't really get in the unrevised.
The thing I was going to say was where he says in both, those do not open doors, his guns, they only close them forever. And how that is kind of foreshadowing the end of the book where he has to lay his guns down before he goes into the tower. And he kind of thinks that he needs the guns to get in there. Like that's his password into the dark hour or something. But I think that's brought into question by the time we make it there.
Yeah.
These do not open doors. Okay. Okay, next section. So we're on, wait, no, that was the end of that section. Okay. No, it wasn't.
Mm-hmm.
We're on part 2 of that part of the conversation. So there was a man who gave you advice. If you want to start there.
Yes. There was a man who gave you advice, he said. Your teacher. Yes, court, the gunslinger interrupted impatiently. The advice was to wait. It was bad advice, for even then Martin's plans against your father had proceeded. And when your father returned, he was killed, the gunslinger said emptily.
This stays pretty much the same until we get to the advice was to wait. It was bad advice. For even then, my plans, not Martin's, my plans against your father had proceeded. He sent you away, and when you returned, I'd not hear you speak of that, the gunslinger said. And in his mind, he heard his mother singing, baby bunting, baby dear, baby bring your basket here. So we switched from Martin to my.
Yes.
It was Martin's plan in the unrevised, which again is like 2 separate people. And then here we're saying was Walter, perhaps as Martin, we don't know, but my plans against your father. And then he doesn't talk about his father being killed either. He took that out.
Yeah.
But I think that change. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, in the unrevised, it talks about his father returning and him being killed, but in the revised, it talks about how Roland was sent away and then returned to him being killed.
And I think he's saying, I'd not hear you speak of that about his mother's death. And that's why he's thinking of his mom singing there. So there's a pretty decent big change as well. Okay, now we get to the big reveal. Who is this man? And it's going to look a little different in both of these as well. Okay, so we're in number 3 on the unrevised.
Yeah. So the man in black is speaking first. And when you turned and looked, Martin was gone west. Yet there was a man in Martin's entourage, a man who affected the dress of a monk and the shaven head of a penitent. Walter, the gunslinger whispered, you're not Martin at all. You're Walter. The man in black tittered. At your service. I ought to kill you now. That would hardly be fair. After all, it was I who delivered Martin into your hands 3 years later.
Okay. Big changes here in this same section. Then hear this. When you returned, Martin had gone west to join the rebels. So all said anyway, and so you believed. Yet he and a certain witch left you a trap, and you fell into it. Good boy. And although Martin was long gone by then, there was a man who sometimes made you think of him, was there not? A man who affected the dress of a monk and the shaven head of a penitent. Walter, the gunslinger whispered. And although he had come so far in his musings, the bald truth still amazed him. You, Martin, never left at all. The man in black tittered. At your service. I ought to kill you now. That would hardly be fair. Besides, all of that was long ago. Now comes the time of sharing. You never left, the gunslinger repeated, stunned. You only changed. Okay. And guys, we're going to wrap this up. That's the last part of that lengthy thing. But there's a lot going on in there. So what do you take away from that?
I mean, in the unrevised, again, Martin and Walter are 2 separate people. Walter is someone who was in his entourage, and also the person that delivered Martin to the gunslingers.
yeah, he couldn't deliver Martin to the gunslingers if it were the same person.
Right.
Also, I think there's a weird stuff here where so in the unrevised, when Walter delivered Martin into the hands of the gunslinger, let's just pretend that happened. Don't you think they would have killed him? They would have executed him because he tried to run away, and they're like, "No, you're a baddie." And what are they going to do with him? They're going to kill him. They're going to execute him. You would think. So then, why is Roland expecting it to be Martin?
Mm-hmm. I will say that in researching for this video, I found out that there was some graphic novels about the fall of Gilead. And so I read the one that was about the Battle of Jericho Hill. And while King didn't write it, so it's not necessarily canonical, he did. He was the creative and executive producer of it. So he sort of at least signed off on it, and it specifically says that Walter and Martin were the same person, but the Man in Black sort of shapeshifted into Walter and shapeshifted a crow into Martin, delivered that Martin that was not an actual person to the gunslingers, and then when Roland shot it, it turned back into a crow and died. So that's sort of an explanation of how it could have gone down if we take Walter turning Martin in as fact.
Right, right, and sure. I mean, why not? And Stephen King was like, "Sure, okay, I'll put my name on that." So something. It's not
You
canonical,
know,
but it's something.
it's an
Uh,
interesting sort of way to tie it in. Take it with a grain of salt, but it's an option as to maybe
sure.
one version of how it went down.
I think so. And then when we read that, it also it made me think. I haven't read those, but it made me think of Zoltan the Raven, and how during that scene in Brown's hut, Roland is very weirded out, and he's like, "Surely this is sorcery. Surely this is a trap. This is the man." Like he might even think that. So maybe we don't know. Brown is a interesting
Yeah.
fellow. That whole thing is pretty
Yes.
weird. So great possibilities there. We do have Martin, instead of just going west, he went west to join the rebels, which when we're talking about Martin is Farson is the good man, and then Roland's going to meet them later in Mehis.
Mm-hmm.
What else? I mean, Walter. It's like I remember reading this for the very first time, and I was like, "Who the hell is Walter?" Like,
Right.
it's
Right.
nobody we've ever heard of yet. So I found that
No.
to be a little jarring. Like, it wasn't a
Yeah.
murder mystery where like, oh, who could it be? It's like, no, we've never heard of that person.
Right. It wasn't even a red herring because we had not had one mention of him in any of the
Yeah.
flashbacks.
So that's a little something. But Roland accepts it. There seems to be an explanation in
Mm-hmm.
both cases, and we accept it
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
And then King kind of puts a point on it when as far as the shape shifting nature of this character, which we will be exploring in the next few videos. You never left, you only changed. So that's where we land with this character in the
Mm-hmm.
revised Gunslinger, which kind of matches up to the end of the series, but we'll see this. So this was part one. We're done part one. I don't know. It might be another two parts, maybe just one, but we're going to see as we move through that this character shifted. So it's a little closer to the unrevised version in the earlier books, and then somewhere in the middle starts shifting towards where it's going to go, and kind of landing
Yeah.
at this point of they are the same person. And if they're the same person, then perhaps it is also John Farson, because we were told that
Yeah.
Martin, the good man, is John Farson. And if Walter is Martin, then Walter is also the good man, is John Farson. It would stand to reason. But when we get to book 4, that's going to be questioned.
Yeah.
And there's
Yes,
going to be
definitely.
interesting language around that. And then we're getting information through the perception of the characters, which is not always to be trusted as fact. So that'll be fun.
Right.
Whew, that, gosh, okay, an hour and 15 minutes. What did I say? Like, no way in hell we're doing this
Yeah.
whole thing in one go. But I
No.
loved it. I it was so fun.
Yeah, it was fun.
And we got a good like side conversations going on as well, not just what it was. Any last thoughts on this character before we wrap up?
Yeah, just keeping all of these different things in mind as we go into the rest of the series, that all of these people may be the same sometimes or all the time, and we're just gonna have to see.
Yes. Yeah. And then we can start thinking about like why. Let's think ahead, guys, and just be like, in book 3, when he kind of gets back on the scene, we don't see much of him in book 2, but when he gets back on the scene, he is now Richard Fannin. And so I'm like, but Roland is seeing him. He calls him Martin. So what the hell, Stephen King? And then Stephen King is like, this is the ageless stranger. And we're like, wait a minute. That's not what you said.
Right. Like, hey, I thought you said it wasn't.
All right, but we'll get there when we get there. So thanks everybody for nerding out and looking at the differences between these two books. Hey, it might even be another episode where we look at some of the other differences between these two versions, because I think that's super interesting to see what changed in 30 years of writing this series, and notable changes like we pointed out today. And stay tuned, where we're going to come back and go through the rest of the books in the series, pick them apart, pull out where is this man? How does he show up? What is he saying about himself? What are other people saying about him? What is King saying about him? What are we supposed to think about him? And have a lot of fun doing that. Thanks for hanging in, guys, until we meet again. And thanks, Ash, for being here and enlightening us all with your amazing insights. Yeah, such fun. Until we meet again, may you all have long days and pleasant nights.